The mole mafia that terrorized our small Scandinavian town was probably the best joke in its 1,000 years of existence. It all started with an article in the local newspaper in which a man named Rupert Albert Timmer demanded the immediate closure of the city's popular dance hall. No one would have noticed if this Rupert had been an ordinary Mr. Punis unknown, but in fact Rupert turned out to be the leader of the second most important political party in the city council. Rupert was a teetotaler and an important member of the local cultural community, which gave him and his foolish proposals some support even from members of other parties. A real headache for us fun lovers. One of the few positive things about Rupert was his very beautiful daughter Madeline, who was in my class. Unfortunately, all my attempts to ask her out were rebuffed with nasty comments about revelers and drinkers. My name is Robert Johnson, and when this story began, me and 7 of my childhood friends had just started our final year at grammar school. We were fortunate to have a club room in the basement of the building where the father of one of us worked as a janitor. This room was the perfect place for us to gather and drink cheap alcohol purchased with a fake ID before heading out to dances on Saturday nights. After a couple of drinks this Saturday night, we decided that Bloody Rupert, or the Rat, as he was called behind his back, needed to be taught a lesson. After several wild proposals, we agreed to a simple action. Rupert was a gardening enthusiast and was proud and famous for his giant pears. So we wrote and sent him a letter that read, "Dear friend Rupert, I've learned that the notorious criminal gang, the Mole Mafia, has sold all your delicious pears to an illegal winemaker. Please leave all the pears where they are, otherwise the Mole Mafia will severely punish you for stealing their property. Sincerely, your faithful supporter and friend." As a law-abiding citizen, Rupert immediately went to the police and demanded protection, which was refused for several practical reasons and caused a high-profile argument with Rupert. At that very moment, a journalist from a local newspaper accidentally walked into the station and received his story of the year. The next day, the front page of the local newspaper featured an image of an angry Rupert with the text, "Rat fight in our city. Prominent politician Rupert A. Timmer, better known as the Rat, was attacked by a gang of criminal moles. The Mole Mafia claims to be somehow in possession of the Rat's prize pears and is selling them to the winemaker. The police will do their best, but they do not have enough officers to protect Mr. Timmer's Garden 247. For most people, this was stupid news, unlikely to be taken seriously. Rupert was said to have created hell in the newspaper office, investing heavily in alarm systems and spending many sleepless nights watching his pears. But this story about the Rat had a very unexpected but interesting side effect. Local opinion began to perceive the mysterious Mole Mafia as scapegoats for all the unsolved crimes in our city. We innocent kids laughed every time we heard these, usually greatly exaggerated, stories about the criminal activities of the Mole Mafia. About 2 months after that famous newspaper article about Rupert's pears, more trouble began. Our local police have a new chief, a true friend of law and order, who has vowed to be the man to put the entire Mole Mafia behind bars. Most of the members of our gang had more or less serious relationships with girls, so our meetings for drinks at the club before going out dancing on Saturday nights were practically a thing of the past. However, one evening we gathered to plan a big party, and the behavior of the new chief of police caused many unpleasant comments, and in the end we all agreed that it was our duty to play a joke on this stupid man. The meeting ended with agreement and vows that our Mole Mafia will remain in the future, a secret brotherhood to help if any of us have problems and need help. We even finalized all the details of how to throw our big party and even a plan to make a fool of the police chief. Our plan worked much better than expected. Rupert the Rat was promised inside information about secret bribes to certain politicians, and the secret evidence was to be handed over to him in a dark section of the city's main park. By chance, the police chief was informed that the leader of the Mole Mafia would be at the same place. They met and poor Rupert was knocked down and handcuffed as he tried to run away, believing it to be an attempt by the Mole Mafia to rob him. However, This turned into the biggest scandal in our city, which forced the chief of police to find a new job far north, and Rupert fed up with public opinion and left politics. 6 years later. Time flies quickly, and many people in our city were truly surprised when I, Robert Johnson, married Rupert Timmer's beautiful daughter, Madeline. Of course, it was quite obvious to me that Madeline's parents considered me far from an ideal husband for their daughter, even though I worked as an engineer for a municipal central heating company. But they had to choose between two evils: either accept me as a son-in-law or prefer that their beautiful daughter remain an unmarried mother. My friend, Dan Peterson, and his best buddy, Nicholas, had pre-booked 2 rooms for 2 weeks at a budget hotel at one of our most popular summer resorts, famous for the wild parties that famous people threw there during their summer vacations in July. No wonder they were hoping to find 2 pretty girls for this trip. But Nicholas had been promoted and had to be elsewhere for the whole of July for work reasons, so Dan asked me to take Nicholas's place, and I immediately agreed and canceled other plans for that time because the girl intended to keep Nicholas company was Madeline Timmer, Rupert Timmer's arrogant daughter, who recently broke up with her spoiled high-class fiancé because of his infidelities. My expectations for success with Madeline were as limited as before at school, but why not think about it after all? She was not the only fish in this sea we were going to. I had no reason to worry about my chances or lack thereof with her when there were plenty of other pretty girls at this summer resort. Our arrival at the hotel caused the first chaos when Madeline demanded that she and the other girls share one room and Dan and I shared another. But the next day Madeline and I started getting along really well as all 4 of us spent the day together at the beach and the first evening having fun at the bar. On the second evening, we, like many other couples, went to the coastal cliffs to watch the sunset while enjoying a picnic with the popular white wine and shrimp mix. It was a warm and pleasant evening, and we all felt good. Then the girls suggested going shopping the next day to a famous outlet 50 kilometers away, since the weather forecast promised thunderstorms and rain. Dan, whose car we used for the trip, was in a cheerful and excited mood and replied, "Yes, my lovely ladies, no problem if you satisfy us right here and now." Maybe older people would be shocked by this, but such things are much more common among young people. Madeline objected at first, but the other girl said, "What the hell, why not?" Madeline hesitated for a while, and then she said, "What the hell, why not?" Back at the hotel, Madeline and Dan switched rooms. Then Madeline acted unexpectedly again, saying, "I was also turned on the rock, and now you must make love to me properly after what I did for you on the rock." The modern Madeline Timmer was indeed very different from the arrogant girl. I remembered when she ignored me during her school days. Her 2 long-term ex-boyfriends may have brought some sanity to her mind before she left them for whatever reason. However, she didn't need to ask me twice. In less than a minute, she was lying naked on the bed. She could barely say a word after this intense sex. After a while, she whispered, "Oh my God, I could never believe that making love to you could be so wonderful." It was truly surprising to hear these words from a girl who was involved in 2 long-term relationships. From that moment, we became a couple and continued dating even after those summer weeks, which could be described as a very romantic time. She wasn't on the pill, so a broken condom incident got her pregnant before her infamous father Rupert Timmer could talk her into leaving me. I didn't run away from what happened to her and was proud when my friends were jealous of me for having a beautiful trophy wife. At least until our first child was old enough for kindergarten and she started working again. Then I recognized the real Madeline. She was still a very beautiful woman, but unfortunately she had turned into a real grumpy vixen. I'm sure you may be asking, why the hell did I marry a shrewish vixen and stay with her? There is a good answer to this question. Alexander, our child. Today, I must admit that a weaker man would have immediately left such a relationship, but my responsibility as the father of a child made this step impossible for me. However, the bad relationship became even worse. In her youth, Madeline was a fairly good swimmer and won several district championships. When her swimming club held a reunion for its old members, she returned home rather drunk from a party at 6 o'clock in the morning. Because of her teetotal parents, she was very careful with alcohol, and I had never seen her so drunk before, at least not after Alexander was born. Her explanation of a late-night drink in a hotel room with old friends living out of town didn't sit well with me, but it might have been the innocent truth. Then 10 days later, a scandal broke with a phone call from one of the old moles. He told me, "I'm in the bar of the Ritz Hotel, where Sebastian Nolberg, better known as Zero, is loudly bragging to everyone that he fucked your wife, Madeline, at the recent old swimmers' meeting." "I'm coming," I told him. Then I shouted at Madeline, "Zero is at the Ritz bar bragging about how he slept with you at the swimmers' party. He must have been damn good for you to stay with him all night." Madeline became furious and screamed, "It's a damn lie. I'll go with you and scrape the truth out of this slimy worm." Zero was also a good swimmer in his youth. Once a national champion, he is now better known as the local Casanova. A thrice-divorced and still successful ladies' man, he usually pursued married women 10 to 20 years his senior who succumbed to his low standards and still very well-built body. We left the baby with the neighbors and drove to the Ritz at top speed. Although Madeline was furious at Zero's boasting, I'm sure she also wanted to protect him from my wrath because she saw what I could do to the horny bastards who pestered her. It happened one day at a Christmas party at a golf club, where I saw a slightly drunk local pro holding his right hand under Madeline's short skirt on the dance floor and caressing her buttocks, ignoring her rather feeble attempts to remove his hand. I went out on the dance floor and interrupted it, which he didn't like very much, and he threatened to give me an unforgettable lesson. His attempt occurred half an hour later when I was standing at the bar and talking with an old acquaintance. Now a very aggressive professional approached me, supported by the field caretaker, a rather large guy. Fortunately for me, they were both quite drunk, and I realized that a surprise attack would be my only chance of avoiding a serious beating. When they got close enough, I lunged and punched the completely unsuspecting big field keeper with my right fist so that he fell to the floor. The surprised professional froze for a second, which was enough for me to kick him between the legs, and when he bent forward, I hit his face with all my strength. I'm sure Madeline remembered this episode because when we arrived at the bar, and before we went inside, Madeline demanded, "Don't do anything. Please don't do anything. I'll find out the truth from him myself." Apparently, she hasn't forgotten what I did to the golf club staff. Zero was still at the bar when we arrived, where Madeline rushed to the booth where he was sitting with his friends. She slapped him in the face and screamed in a loud voice, "You are bragging about sleeping with me. This is true? Tell me, is this true?" He was taken by surprise, and when he saw me standing there, he replied in a quiet voice, "No, no, of course not." Madeline was not satisfied with this, so she hit him again and screamed, "Tell everyone here, did you sleep with me at the swimmers' party? Speak loudly so everyone can hear." Zero responded in a loud voice, "No, no, no, I never slept with you. I only told my friends that I dreamed it. Just a dream, nothing real." She slapped him in the face again and screamed, "You're a sick bastard trying to ruin my marriage." Then many people intervened, standing between me and Zero, and I could not do anything against him, and Madeline and I returned home. I can't deny that Zero's boast about the swimmers' party made me suspicious of what might actually have happened, but I didn't see any way to investigate further. It's no exaggeration to say that this episode made my bad marriage even worse, especially a couple of weeks later when Zero was badly beaten, and I asked Madeline if she was at the hospital with flowers for her dear friend. When a wife complains and grumbles, even a saint can sometimes fight back. Time passed until Madeline put the last straw on my overflowing cup of patience during a barbecue at her parents' house. There were about 18 people there, most of whom were friends of her parents, whom I barely knew. Before the meal, I was helping Rupert with the grill when Madeline found something wrong with the meat, which caused her to explode during the meal as she loudly said, "Sorry my worthless hubby couldn't handle the meat." He doesn't know how to do anything right at all. Now the meat could refer to both the grill and my dick, one being a gross insult and the other a very big insult. Everyone stared at me, and I stood up from the table and loudly answered her. Why the hell are we still living together if I can't give you good meat? Madeline, I want a divorce so you can be free to have fun with your fan Sebastian Nolberg or the damn horny golf pro who will fry your meat. I hope for your sake they are much better at this than I am. I'm tired of your betrayals and damn grumbling. Thanks to them and goodbye to everyone. No one, not even Rupert, said anything as I took my son, got into the car, and drove home. Madeline returned home half an hour later, but to my great surprise, she looked more like a little kitten than the angry tiger I had expected to see. She cried and said that she only complained that I cooked meat and not anything else, and that she was wrong to insult me when I kindly helped her father. She begged me to forgive her and promised to be a much better loving wife in the future. An hour later, I agreed to listen to her point of view on our problems. She sobbed and said, "It's not your fault that I was a vixen towards you. This is my own fault and disappointment because I had big plans for the future with traveling to exotic places and working abroad. All my plans fell apart when I became pregnant and an abortion was impossible. I accepted my fate until I started working again, and then everything started to feel like a prison, and you were the warden. Why didn't you tell me about this so we could get a divorce much earlier? I could take custody of Alexander, and you could go back to your dream." Madeline sobbed, "I don't want a divorce. You and Alexander mean everything to me. Please, let's remain a family. I promise to be a better wife if you forgive me and give me a second chance." I asked her, "What do you really want? This is your great opportunity to change your life and fulfill your dreams. Why are you hesitating now when you can leave and forget a worthless hubby like me and enjoy life around the world as a happy single woman?" In her desperate attempts to get a second chance, Madeline even suggested that I give her a good spanking for her bitchy behavior at the barbecue. But that wasn't my style, so I just said, no, thanks to that suggestion. However, an hour later, she persuaded me to give her a 3-month trial period as the best wife. On that memorable night, Madeline really tried to be a good wife in bed. We even had long, sweet morning sex to start our first day in our happy new marriage. If our relationships outside the bedroom become just as good, our problems will be solved. Everything was going well until she missed her next period, and the test strip confirmed the situation. She was pregnant. We remained a happy family during her pregnancy, and during the year she spent at home with this child. Madeline used this time to study in the evenings, and I must admit that she did it very well. Returning to work, she was asked to apply for a management position, and to her own and everyone's surprise, she got it. It meant a lot to her and to our family. She got a company car and even a slightly higher salary than me. In most ordinary families, this would be a positive thing, but because of Rupert, not in ours. At the same time, he sold his house for a very good price and promised to give half of the money to Madeline and our children. Rupert is Rupert, so it wasn't without strings attached. Rupert's main condition was that Madeline and I should split all our assets, and from that day our house was legally separated in the tax and court registers. Madeline and I should have completely separate finances. I would not be involved in the finances of the children or Madeline. I didn't mind being excluded from Madeline's funds, but anything that concerned children was an insult to me. My comments to Rupert about interfering with our family economy included suggesting he put his money up his ass, and even offering to help him do it by kicking him there. Rupert did not pay attention to my words, but his wife, who heard all this, immediately went home and refused to talk to me for several months. Madeline and I had a real row over Rupert's terms, because she really valued her father's gift, and I was categorically against Rupert, the rat, interfering in our family affairs. After several serious arguments, I finally agreed to Madeline's proposal that we each contribute an equal percentage of our salaries each month to a joint account for family expenses, and use the rest as we see fit. Children's funds, no matter how small, will be managed jointly. After this, the quarrels stopped and our relationship became happy again, except that Madeline's parents and I avoided each other, which was quite acceptable to me. Madeline called me at work on Thursday afternoon and said that some of her colleagues had persuaded her to join them after work for an after-work trip to a nearby pub for a couple of hours, if that suited me. My only question was, isn't after work usually on Fridays? Why Thursday? Her answer that married people prefer Friday fun with their kids on Friday nights sounded reasonable, and I didn't have any further questions. The next Thursday, she told me in the morning that they would go to the after-work party again that evening, which again was normal for me. Everything went well at home until 6 o'clock, when our daughter Matilda cut her hand by falling on a vase of flowers she was carrying, until I noticed it. Her arm was bleeding heavily and needed to be stitched up at the hospital. I called a neighbor, arranged for a nanny for Alexander, and then called Madeline on her cell phone. She answered the phone after a surprising number of rings, and I told her what had happened, told her that Matilda was crying and wanted to go to her mother, and asked if she was sober enough to go to the hospital. She said she was sober, and we agreed to meet there. On the way to the hospital, I had a strange feeling that Matilda's accident wasn't the only bad thing that happened that evening. After much thought about everything that had happened that evening, the answer hit me like lightning. This was Madeline's answer to my phone call. Not only did she take a long time to respond, but also the silence behind her. No bar sound in the background. Wherever she was when she answered my call, it certainly wasn't a busy bar. We met in the emergency room, where Madeline agreed to stay with Matilda while I went home to look after Alexander. This damn Thursday was probably the worst day of my life and my children's life. Not only were there a few stitches on Matilda's arm, but our main problem was that I was now 100% sure that Madeline was doing something behind my back, and I would need to get proof and file for divorce in the near future, and this time nothing could stop me. My firm decision to divorce was made the moment I saw her in the hospital. One brief glance at her was enough to make it obvious and beyond doubt that my call had interrupted her lovemaking with her lover and caused her to jump out of the bed where the act was taking place. To Madeline's credit, she didn't waste a second getting ready when her baby was calling her. As I expected, when Madeline returned home, she immediately went to the shower. She didn't say anything about her interrupted after work, and I didn't ask because I wanted to get further information about her possible infidelity before taking any action. My chance would probably come the very next day, which was Friday, when Madeline's parents were supposed to take her and Alexander to Legoland, the famous amusement park in Denmark, for the weekend. I got to stay at home with Matilda, who was too young to travel, which was ideal for me because Madeline had a workshop scheduled at a nice hotel the following week on Thursday and Friday, and I needed to gather more information before that. On Friday evening, while Matilda was sleeping, I began my investigation in our office, where we had 2 tables along the wall. Madeline's laptop was on her desk as usual, but I discovered it was password protected, and after several failed attempts, I gave up. Cracking passwords is not my specialty, so Madeline's laptop, which probably contained all the answers, remained inaccessible. Madeline called and said they were at the hotel and asked about Matilda, then immediately hung up when I told her she was fine. I continued my search, and the next task was the locked drawers of her desk. They were pretty basic locks, so I took a pin and started tinkering with the locks and making a spare key that would fit my own drawers. There is an old saying, "It's a shame to give up," and I didn't give up, so my efforts paid off after some time when the first lock opened, but there were only a few information papers in the box about her next workshop and nothing interesting in the second box. Everything indicated that this was indeed a seminar and not a fake. But in the third and final box, I found real bingo. When I opened the small plastic box, I found 4 condoms, apparently from our bedside table, and a blue pill of unknown origin. I had never had to use the blue pills, and apparently Madeline's lover didn't have his own supply either, so she found some other source to ensure her conference lover's horniness. Madeline was temporarily off the pill for medical reasons, so we used condoms from the stash in my nightstand, while her doctor looked for a solution to her problem. I bought a pack of 5 dozen and wouldn't notice a decrease in quantity. In that drawer, I also found a USB drive, which I inserted into my laptop and discovered that it contained photos from some corporate events. Most of them were very innocent pictures without any negative comments. Most of them were apparently taken by Madeline on her mobile phone, because she was only visible in a few photographs, apparently taken with a different camera due to the very high resolution. The only almost non-existent hint was that there was always a blonde, rather handsome guy next to her. A closer look at the USB drive revealed that Madeline had taken several photos of the guy alone. In some photographs, he was sitting at a table next to an empty seat, indicating that the photographer may have been sitting there. All this interest in the blonde was hardly accidental. But the question about their relationship remained unanswered. Was this guy her lover, or just a colleague and a good guy? My next question should have been, who is this guy? Photos of Madeline gave me no evidence of infidelity, nor information about the beloved guy who seemed to be next to her. Then, in the official yearbook of her work, I found a folded A4 sheet from a color printer. The photo showed Madeline and a blonde man sitting on a sofa and kissing. He lifted her skirt with his right hand and held it on her inner thigh so that almost all of her legs were visible. Under the photo, someone wrote, "Great legs, my darling, really great legs," and captioned the post, Kim. Here, Kim is a unisex name, used for both boys and girls, but the only Kim on the conference list was Kim Sturebin, so I assumed he was a fan of Madeline. Now I could consider the results of my investigation a real bingo, since both Kim and Sturebin are such rare names that collecting more information on this guy would be a one-left job. Although no other information was found in the box, I was already 100% sure that Madeline was cheating on me with Kim, and the necessary actions needed to be taken, which ensured that I had a busy Saturday. I first started with a phone directory that only had 3 Sturebins, and only one of them was Kim, who shared his landline with Elizabeth, but both had different cell phone numbers. This convinced me that I was on the right track. A new law in our country prohibits the purchase of credit and personal information from commercial sources without a valid legal basis for doing so, and the target will always receive a hard copy of the information sold by mail. One of my Mole Gang friends had access to a fictitious real estate company in Gibraltar used as a buyer of information, and this company was mentioned in Kim's copy. No sign of me. Although Kim and his wife had good jobs, they had surprisingly large debts. Otherwise, there were no apparent problems with this information. Almost an ordinary family with 1 child, a house, and 2 rather old cars. In my opinion, the main problem with Kim's family was that he, without a doubt, slept with my wife. Of course, I had no proof of this, only some strong evidence. I then took Matilda to McDonald's, which is a big deal for little kids, and then we went to my work, where we used waterproof green ink paint to label some items. I took a small amount in a small bottle and returned home. At home, I went to my workshop and grabbed the syringe and needle that I used to lubricate my watch winders, plus a small tube of super glue. I carefully opened the packages of 4 Madeline condoms, took out the condoms and injected green dye into the condoms, making a tiny hole, and carefully sealed them with super glue. I had to make 7 condoms to get 4 that looked perfect. It would take them many days to get the waterproof paint off since they couldn't use strong cleaners on such delicate body parts. Alexander called me on Saturday evening and said that they were doing great, and he had a very good day, so he was enthusiastic to tell me everything he had done that day. When I wanted to talk to Madeline, Alexander said that Mom and Grandpa had gone to the reception to do some business, so I said that Mom could call me later if she wanted. She didn't call and obviously had nothing to tell me. I assumed that Rupert, a teetotaler, and his daughter had quietly gone to the hotel bar for a drink. No more calls from Madeline during their trip, and she returned home on Sunday evening. For some reason, she began to rant about Matilda's accident. I thought you could watch the kids for a few hours on Thursday night, but obviously that's too much for you. You can't even look after a child every minute. When a problem arose, I reacted quickly and correctly. Sorry that I had to disturb you in your fun activities. Anyway, thank you very much for stopping what you were doing and coming to the hospital, I replied, and for a moment I saw the fear on her face, which meant that my words were on target. She screamed, "What the hell did you mean by that?" I said what I said. I'm glad that our children are still more important to both of us than our other interests. This answer stopped the quarrel. Monday and Tuesday passed quickly, without any further arguments with Madeline, but also without any attempts at sex on either side. The big question in my situation, where I knew for sure that my wife was planning to cheat on me, was whether I should hint to her that I was aware of what was happening so that she could cancel her plans. After much thought, I decided that it was only fair to give Madeline a warning, which could have saved our marriage if she had chosen to do so. On Wednesday night, before going to bed, I told her, "There are rumors of warm feelings between you and someone who is also going to this seminar. If this marriage means anything to you and you want to stay married to me, please give up all intentions of sleeping with anyone there." Madeline reacted much stronger than I expected and screamed, "You must be crazy, and don't you dare touch me tonight." I replied, "Don't worry, you're acting like you used to again, so I don't have any temptation." She left for a conference early Thursday morning, and during my lunch break, I went to court to get divorce papers. When I got home, I checked her drawer and, as expected, found that the box of condoms was missing. Now, the only important question was, did they do this immediately after receiving their numbers, or were their schedules so busy that there was simply no time for such pleasures? If so, they would have to wait until dinner in the evening. My guess was that it happened late in the evening because I'm sure they even went to the bar to chat with other members. They also turned off the lights because the longer they didn't know about it, the more the color spread. You can be sure that I took no pleasure in the end of my marriage, but I did take some pleasure in their impending embarrassment. Rupert usually went to bed quite early on weekdays, so I switched my landline to forward to his number. It's okay if his slightly naughty and very angry daughter wakes him up screaming hysterically, thinking it's me or me pretending to be Rupert. My cell phone was on vibrate so as not to disturb me or the children, but it sat on my bedside table, where it started vibrating at about 12:30 and continued to do so every 10 minutes for the next hour and a half. Before the kids and I left the house the next morning, I switched the landline again and listened to a few voicemails on my cell phone. I couldn't say my marriage was happy that day. Far from it, because my dear wife was screaming and cursing at me in all her messages. "What the hell did you do? Make sure you fucking stupid male swine pay a heavy price for this idiotic stunt. How do I get rid of this damn color? Call me immediately." Why should I respond to such vulgar messages? Besides, I couldn't tell her anything. I couldn't avoid her calls at work because they would bother other people, so I took the first call just a few minutes after arriving at work. Madeline screamed, "Are you happy now? Do you know what you did to me?" "What did you do?" She shouted, "Don't play innocent. You know exactly what I'm talking about." "No, I don't have the slightest idea what you're talking about. Are you accusing me of something bad?" She sounded tense now and said in a quieter voice, "Condoms, you idiot." "What condoms? Why do you use condoms in your seminar? You are cheating on me." She continued, "How do I get rid of the color?" "Why do you use colored condoms? Are colored condoms any different? Thank you for admitting to seminary treason. You know the consequences." She sounded desperate now and asked, "Please tell me how to get rid of this damn color." "Don't ask me. I've never used colored condoms. Ask your damn boyfriend. It should be his problem, not mine." I waited for her to answer, but she ended the call. A few minutes later, I received a call from Rupert asking me if his daughter had any problems because she had called the previous evening and was obviously in a terrible state. I replied that she had called me just a few minutes ago about some problem with condoms, which would lead to serious consequences for Madeline if she used condoms and cheated, while she was at a seminar away from her husband. No doubt Rupert and his wife will have an interesting conversation about their now decidedly not-so-beautiful daughter. After that, it was time to add some spice to Kim's family life, so I sent his wife a copy of the photo of Madeline and him kissing, with the comment, "Dear Elizabeth Sterebin, I found this photo by chance in a book, and since your husband and my cheating wife spent last night in the same hotel, perhaps something similar happened again. If Kim, when he gets home, has permanent green stains on his body, the color is from my wife's condoms, which I modified to trap the cheating wife and her lover. Best wishes, Robert Johnson." About an hour later, Kim's wife called me for more information. She had a very pleasant and sensual voice, although she made it clear that my letter came as a real surprise to her, and the photograph could have been part of some innocent situation and could hardly be considered evidence of betrayal. I agreed and told her that nothing was certain yet, but my wife and apparently someone else had fallen into my trap with the color, and it could be assumed that it might have been her husband due to his early interest in Madeline. Elizabeth interested me. Nice voice, but was she the innocent victim of a stupid, cheating husband or the bitch who caused his actions? However, we agreed to stay in touch if she found green on her husband. When I returned home after work, I found an angry Madeline already there. She had green palms and a large green patch on her right cheek and on the edge of her lips. Possibly on the lip itself, but she wore bright lipstick to hide it. She screamed at me, "Are you happy now, having made me a laughing stock among my colleagues?" I answered in a quiet voice, "No, not at all, because today is one of the worst days of my life. A broken family is not a reason for joy, at least in my opinion. Why are you complaining? You spent the night with your lover, and from now on you can have his full time forever." Madeline was surprised and asked, "What do you mean?" "Your cheating last night ended this marriage, and I feel sorry for our innocent children who will face a lot of problems because of this," I told her. Then I gave her the divorce papers and said, "Whether you sign them or not doesn't matter to the divorce. You will save a significant amount of legal fees if you agree to the terms as written and sign the papers now." She started crying and sobbed, "I love you, and you are the father of our children. Please don't do this to us. Please let us be a happy family again." A loving wife doesn't act like a conference bitch, and it depends on the DNA tests whether I am the father of your children, I said. Madeline screamed, "Oh my God," and ran to our bedroom. Elizabeth Sterebin called me a few minutes later and said that her husband had green palms and several green spots on his body. After confessing his affair with my wife, he was now packing his bags. Elizabeth and I agreed to meet the next day in the park to share further information. I wondered if the hotel would charge me for the damaged bed linen. I went to the park alone, and 10 minutes after the meeting time, a very beautiful woman in her early 30s approached me with a small boy. She was very beautiful, with sparkling eyes, which surprised me because I was expecting something like a bitch. I thought that perhaps the boy was a guarantee that I would not try to force her to do anything. "Elizabeth Sterebin, I presume?" "Yes, and you must be that nasty Robert Johnson who ruined my marriage with his green color. Your husband and my wife destroyed our marriages. He must be completely crazy to cheat on such a beautiful wife and create serious family problems," I said. She and her son Kevin accepted my invitation to a nearby cafe where Kevin, after cakes and forfeits, found a game room and went there. We adults continued our conversation. I said to her, "I must confess that you are not at all the kind of woman I expected to see today, and there is no doubt that your husband must have been a fool to do what he did." She looked at me strangely, smiled, and replied, "Sorry to disappoint you if you were expecting a real bitch." I said, "I expected something like this, but for me, it's not a disappointment." Then she wanted to know everything about Madeline's infidelity, and I told her the truth, that there was no bar background and her hair was disheveled when she came to the hospital. I even talked about finding condoms in the drawer and painting them. Elizabeth told me about her difficulties in resolving the issue of divorce. The third time I told Elizabeth how wonderful she was, She was obviously tired and interrupted me, saying, "Sorry, my friend, if you are trying to talk me into some kind of revenge, you are in the wrong place." I took the hint and replied with a smile, "Have you ever heard of love at first sight? I'm not a teenager anymore, so that's out of the question for me." I continued to smile and said, "But you almost look like a teenager." Even though I didn't believe that such feelings could happen to me at my age, I must admit that my opinion on this matter has changed today since I met you. Nice try, but nothing like that will happen. I accept your words and promise to be a true friend during this turmoil and stop all attempts to move forward. We can support each other as friends, I told her, and she agreed. Elizabeth's boy saw a circus poster and wanted to go there. I suggested to her that we go there the next day with our children. Elizabeth actually surprised me by saying, "Yeah, that would be fun." When I returned home, I found Madeline's parents waiting for me and doing everything they could to convince me to cancel my divorce plans. I told them that I didn't care if they accepted infidelity in their relationship, but that this type of behavior would not be tolerated in my marriage. Rupert was not happy when I thanked him for demanding a shared budget for Madeline and me, which made our divorce an easy matter. All that remained was to agree on joint custody of our children. Before leaving my house, Rupert surprised me by asking if I could agree to helping Madeline buy my share of the house so that the children could stay in their old home if their parents didn't come back to their senses. I told Rupert that this was fine with me, but the sale of my part or all of the house would be based on the estate agent's market value estimate. For some reason, Rupert didn't seem happy when he realized the house wouldn't be a good buy for his daughter. The circus with Elizabeth and her baby was a real hit, and the day was made even better when she invited me for coffee and my kids for lemonade and cake after the circus. While our kids were playing, she asked me with a smile on her face, "Did I offend you when that love at first sight trick didn't work out the way you expected?" "This love is real and is not any trick, and I was afraid that you would avoid me as a stupid stalker because I dared to tell you the truth," I answered with humility. She looked at me strangely before saying that Kim would live with her parents for a week or two until she decided whether to get a divorce or not. I, in turn, told her that my divorce papers had been drawn up and my next step would be to find an apartment because my in-laws and ex-wife had asked to buy the house from me. Elizabeth said that she wanted another child, but Kim refused to agree to it, and if he gets a second chance, then she will not accept any refusal in this matter. I couldn't help myself and offered to help her, saying, "It's not a problem at all. Let me volunteer for this mission, and I can promise that we will get through this very quickly. You must understand that a child means much more than conception. Will you voluntarily take on all other responsibilities associated with this child?" she asked me. "Certainly." She now looked serious as she asked, "Did you seriously and truly understand and mean what you promised to do?" "I understand and always keep my word, but it's up to you what to do and who to do it with." Here we were interrupted by the children, and nothing more was said about Elizabeth's plans for the future. Back home, thinking about Elizabeth, I was pretty sure Kim would get her second chance within a week. But later in the evening, I received a text message from her. "Did you really tell me the truth today?" My short answer was, "Yes, I did. The divorce papers have been drawn up and will be filed tomorrow. Real estate agency contacted me. The child with you will be wonderful." The next day, I completed my errands and sent Elizabeth a message informing her of this. The real estate agency belongs to one of my friends, who promised me a good price. Even in a divorce, I will not deceive my wife. I told him I wanted a fair price. Elizabeth responded with a text message that she and Kim would meet at the pub after work to sort out family issues, and this would likely be his last chance to save their marriage if he agreed to her terms. I had no comment on this, and Madeline was mad as a wasp because I filed for divorce before she had a chance to read the documents that had been available to her all weekend. Of course, it was not kind of me to get an estimate of the value of our house for sale without her permission. She turned pale when I told her the expected price level we could get if we sold it and split the money. She was right about that, but I couldn't let her slow down our breakup or let Rupert throw me out of my house without paying the right price. She screamed, "How can you do this to me? We are still married and have 2 children. Don't we owe them a serious attempt at counseling to save our family?" I replied, "How the hell could you sleep with this Sterebin even though I begged you to stop and warned you seriously the night before when you left? No consultant on this earth can erase the kind of arrogance and disrespect you showed me. Plus you're back to acting like a total bitch like before. I think this is your true face." It doesn't matter what I said then. She was right about this. Marriage counselors can save many marriages, even after infidelity, but everything I told Elizabeth about love at first sight was true for me. All my hopes and dreams for the future were tied to Elizabeth, and somehow emotionally I was just as much of a cheater as Madeline. However, it was obvious that Elizabeth saw Kim as her first choice, and I knew that my only option at this point was to wait on the sidelines. Even if she forgives Kim, he will soon realize that she has an ace up her sleeve if he makes mistakes. Kim had a great opportunity to mend his relationship that evening, and I could only wait for a message from Elizabeth that it had happened. A short message from Elizabeth arrived a few minutes before 8 p.m. and read, "Kim and I have agreed to divorce." I replied, "This is a big step with a lot of emotions. I love you and call me anytime if you want to talk." Her answer came a minute later. "Thank you very much. Love you too. We'll talk tomorrow." Elizabeth called me at work the next morning and said that Kim was in a very arrogant mood during their meeting and did not talk much about solving their problems. He demanded that she return him and abandon all plans for a second child, to which she told him that she would rather get a divorce than continue as before and pretend that nothing had happened. He surprised her by telling her that divorce was good for him, and she could always call him if she regretted losing the best man she could ever find. He was embarrassed when Elizabeth told him that from now on he would have to compete with Madeline Johnson's soon-to-be ex-husband if she wanted him back. Then, a little alarmed, Elizabeth asked if she had done the right thing by mentioning my name, and if everything I had told her before was still valid. I said, "I love you, Elizabeth, and there is no need to keep it a secret. Of course, I will keep my word." She sounded happy and suggested we meet at the pub after work. Madeline must have heard the gossip from Kim because she called me 10 minutes later, shouting, "What do you mean, having an affair with Elizabeth Sterebin instead of going to counseling with your own wife? Are you really the right woman to ask me this question? However, we are not having a dirty affair like you and Elizabeth's husband. We will act openly if we become a couple," I told her, and she hung up. Madeline was right. Her betrayal created a completely strange situation. The sane average man would have done everything possible to save his marriage to her. In some ways, Madeline was not a bad woman, beautiful, hardworking, with a good job and a good mother to our children. Just not a good wife for me. I wanted to break up with her for a woman I knew very little about. Like a drowning man, he grabs the first thing he sees. No doubt it was a high-level game, but you will never win if you don't take risks. When Elizabeth and I met, she said that Kim apparently expected her to beg him to come back and forgive him without any further comment. When she told him about me, he laughed out loud and said, "That poor weakling, I'll scare him half to death so that he'll never dare look at you again, that's for sure." Elizabeth had apparently gathered information about me from her friends because she replied, "Better ask Madeline Johnson what Robert did to the golf pro and the greengrocer when the two of them tried to attack him at the Christmas party at the golf club." The arrogant Kim, who apparently had hot intentions for Madeline, accepted her proposed divorce and signed the papers she had received earlier that day. Elizabeth then made me promise not to make the first move to attack Kim. I agreed because I wanted to be a good friend to Kevin if I had a chance with Elizabeth, and hurting her boy's father would be very stupid under the circumstances. Before we broke up, she invited me over to her house on a Friday night to play Trivial Pursuit with a new set of cards her sister had bought. I agreed and realized that this would be a very important evening in my life. TP is an easy game, but poorly educated people do very poorly. Madeline had other things to do on Friday, so I had to take the kids with me to Elizabeth's. Sister Elizabeth and her husband were a cheerful couple, so we had a pleasant evening. I won the first round, and I think Elizabeth was pleased with it, as she could show her relatives that her new friend had at least some intelligence and common sense. The second round was between couples as a team. Elizabeth and I won because we had good luck asking the right questions for a long time. The truth is that she was no less smart than me. The most important thing for me during this round was how easy it was for Elizabeth and me to work together without major fights. We had a great time, and her sister invited us over the next week to get revenge. When the kids and I were ready to go home, Elizabeth hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear, "I love you." "I love you too," I replied and kissed her quickly. One step forward, but obviously still a long way to the goal. Elizabeth spent the weekend with her parents, and Madeline did the same, so I went to a party with some single friends, but came home alone. Elizabeth and I exchanged several text messages over the weekend. She called me darling and wanted to know what I was doing that evening, and I told her the truth. Monday was my lucky day because one of my colleagues had a theater package for two, including a bus ride, tickets to a popular musical, and a night at a business hotel in our capital city, which she was unable to use due to a sudden, more important event. I bought her package without a second thought. Then I called Elizabeth and invited her to come with me. She promised to say yes if I could answer a few questions about how much it would cost her and if there were any strings attached to my offer. I realized that she wanted to know if there were any requirements regarding sex, and I replied, "My dear, don't worry. There are no hidden costs, traps, or requirements, just an invitation to watch this famous musical." "Darling, it will be a great pleasure," she said, and this made me happy and made me wonder if we would ever have sex, or if this beautiful woman might be frigid. This could explain why Kim seduced Madeline. However, I decided to act like a real good guy, no matter what happened during this trip, and let it go at its own pace. Comparing our schedules for that week, we didn't find any evenings we could spend together, but we had lunch together on Tuesday and Thursday and agreed to meet at the bus station on Saturday morning. We met, and she was in a cheerful mood, so I expected it to be a great weekend, and I was right. We both agreed that the musical was much better than expected, and the dinner afterwards in a cozy restaurant was very romantic. Afterwards, we went to the piano bar at our hotel for a drink. Elizabeth declined the second drink and asked me my opinion of the trip. "It couldn't be better, I enjoyed every minute," was my sincere response. After that, she suggested we go to our room to talk about some things before going to bed. I booked a room with 2 beds and accepted her decision without argument, thinking, what will be will be. When we entered our room, Elizabeth said, "I love you, Robert," and sat down on the sofa. "I love you, Elizabeth," I replied and sat down next to her. She asked, "Do you have any plans for the future, and how involved is Madeline? Can you please be kind enough to tell me the truth, because I have heard some rumors?" Madeline and I filed for divorce, and we agreed that I would sell my share of the house to her. Of course, there are still a few issues related to our children that we need to solve together, I said. "How about we bring her back? Rumors say that Madeline is telling her friends that you will bring her back soon. Please remember that you promised to tell me the truth," Elizabeth said with a worried look on her face. "I already got her back once, before we had Matilda, when it was close to divorce, and I'm not going to repeat that mistake. Trust me, that's for sure," I told her. "I believe you. Do you have any plans for us?" she asked with a smile. "I really love you and want to marry you. If you think one of us is just a rebound, it can wait. We must be together for this tango. Let's do this together and turn my sweet dreams into real plans. But before doing that, I have to ask a question that may be painful for you, and I ask you to tell me the truth, even if it may hurt. Will you tell me the truth?" This unexpected question worried her. She replied, "Whatever you ask, I promise to tell you the truth." I was wondering why Kim would so easily give up on a wonderful wife like you without any real effort to win you back. There must be some serious problem in your marriage that caused him to cheat on you and care so little about divorcing a woman as wonderful as you. Have you ever cheated on him and he found out about it? I had to ask her about this. Elizabeth started crying and sobbing. Yeah, I did it once, got drunk and acted stupid at a Christmas party, and he never forgave me for it. Are you going to leave me now? No, absolutely not. The most important thing for us is that you told me the truth so that we could throw all the skeletons out of the closet and start our relationship with a clean slate. I love you, Elizabeth, and what Kim and you did before we met is a story that doesn't concern us. You still love me even though you found out I'm a bitch just like Madeline, she asked, still sobbing. Yes, Elizabeth, I love you, and there is a huge difference between what Madeline did and what you did. She did this several times, carefully planning ahead. You made one stupid mistake that you probably really regretted. Plus, I'm getting a divorce too because Madeline was unhappy with me, and I feel the same about her. Treason put an end to this sentence. Don't you think we've talked enough about the past, and it's time to talk about dreams and plans for the future? What about Kim? Do you have any intentions of fighting him for what he did to your pride? She asked. Nothing about Kim, because a good relationship with Kevin is much more important to me than a stupid vendetta with his father. Besides, he did me two favors. He ended a bad marriage and showed me the path to a good one. This answer brought a bright smile to my face. Is a child included in your dreams? Do you remember that you promised me a child? Is that promise still valid after I admitted that I'm a bitch? She asked. I'm used to keeping my promises, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure we have a baby. But don't you think we need to live together for a while to take care of the baby? Are you ready for this? Yes, I'm ready, and you? Was her next question, and she began to smile again. You can never win anything important without taking risks. Although I knew little about Elizabeth, I felt it was time to act and do it now. I got down on one knee, looked her straight in the eye, and said, Elizabeth, I love you very much, and I'm asking you, would you like to marry me? This was completely unexpected for her, and several seconds passed before she replied, Yes, Robert, I love you and want to marry you. We stood up and began intensely hugging and kissing. A few minutes later, she stood topless, and I saw her breasts for the first time. After a short rest, we did it again, and this time it lasted longer. Elizabeth was a great lover, and since we were both in love, we did everything we could to make it a night to remember. After a great morning of sex, Elizabeth had a bright smile on her face and asked, What happens now when we get home? Stop taking the pills so we can start making our love, child, I replied with my best smile. This was my heart speaking, but our minds knew that we were both involved in divorces and had many other issues to think about. Madeline and Rupert bought my share of the house for much more than they expected, and Kim Sterebin moved in with Madeline as a sort of lodger. He became a real headache for Rupert, requiring him to do all sorts of chores around Madeline's house. Elizabeth and I found the perfect home for our new, soon-to-be family with 4 children. Joint custody went very well, and Madeline and Kim cooperated. But an unexpected event shook our city just 2 months later when the owners of the company where Madeline and Kim worked surprised everyone by making a quick deal and selling it to a large multinational company. For Madeline, this meant a significant advancement in her career as she was promoted to a management position at head office. Her new job included a lot of travel abroad and a move to an apartment near the head office in our capital. In her hometown, she kept 2 rooms for her own use in her house and rented the rest to Rupert and her mother. Kim could no longer stay at my old house with Rupert while Madeline was away, so he shared a 2-bedroom apartment with a colleague until he found something better. He, too, had new responsibilities in a new organization, which meant a lot of traveling to clients. There isn't much chance for Madeline and him to see each other or continue sharing custody of the children. Elizabeth and I took full custody of the children, with visitation rights for Madeline and Kim and the ability to take the children for major holidays every other time if they wanted. These new custody rules were very unexpected for Elizabeth and me, but we accepted them with great pleasure. Sometimes I couldn't help but think about what might have happened if Madeline and I had been married when she got promoted to her dream job that allowed her to travel all over the world. What would she choose, work or family? I didn't ask her about it, but one day, when Madeline returned the children after the weekend, she surprised me by saying, "I'm happy to have gotten my dream job, but if I had known how much cheating would cost me, I would never have even thought about it." What could I say? My simple answer was, what has been done cannot be undone, and all we can do today is look to the future and enjoy what it brings. Then Madeline surprised me by asking, "Are you happy now, Robert?" "Yes, I'm happy. Thanks to Elizabeth, I have a normal life again. Please remember that you beat me to 9 in the hospital when I realized you came straight from your lover's bed, and you even hit me hard again when I begged you to save our marriage and not sleep with Kim at the seminar. But you didn't attach any importance to my feelings. But marriage is only a part of life. Are you happy now, Madeline?" I asked her. She answered in a quiet voice, "No and yes. Kim was a terrible mistake that I regret, shedding tears on sleepless nights. But I'm happy that you and Elizabeth are taking good care of our children, and I'm happy about my life in my new job." Elizabeth and I got married a week after both of our divorces were finalized, and she is expecting our long-awaited child. This is an incredible love story. I could never believe that my positive feelings towards Elizabeth when we first met to talk about our spouse's infidelity would lead to a happy marriage. Elizabeth and Kim's neighbors refused to choose sides in their divorces and invited both of them and their new spouses to their annual barbecue. Kim came alone, and when someone asked about his girlfriend, he simply said that he thought she was in China on business. Elizabeth and I got the same impression that he didn't look happy. Elizabeth and I had a great time all evening, which many of her old friends noticed and congratulated her on being happy and pregnant. A few drinks later, when I met Kim in the bar tent, he said, "Congratulations, you're the winner of this damn mess." I could only agree with him and sincerely replied, "I don't want you and Madeline not to be happy.